These are images from France. More than 2,000 cars have been set on fire. There have been more than 3,880 fires. 875 people have now been taken into custody. Close to 250 policemen have been injured. The situation is very, very tense. France may be forced to declare emergency with riots continuing and spreading after a 17-year-old boy was shot dead by the police for an alleged traffic violation. The situation is worsening. 40,000 police personnel have been deployed on the streets and more are on standby for deployment. We will get you the latest. Nike and Zara stores have been looted. We'll get you those images. Malls have been set on fire. Libraries have been set on fire. The apprehension is that the situation will worsen over the weekend. All public transport systems, the buses, trams have been stopped in Paris. Several buses and trams were set on fire. I'm Gaurav Sawant. We will get you the latest, but first, as always, the headlines on India First. Uniform Civil Code likely to be tabled in upcoming monsoon session. Parliamentary panel of 31 MPs to deliberate on the 3rd of July. Senthil Balaji to continue as minister after governor puts dismissal order on hold. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin writes to the governor R.N. Ravi, says the governor has no powers to sack a minister. Another centre versus state conflict reaches the Supreme Court. Arvind Kejriwal government in Delhi moves the apex court, says ordinance sidelines an elected government. High drama in Manipur. Chief Minister N. Biren Singh letter offering to resign torn by protesters. The Chief Minister now says he will not resign at this critical juncture. The opposition calls it staged drama. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Putin discusses the war in Ukraine and the Wagner mutiny with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As the situation worsens in France, the French President Emmanuel Macron has urged parents to keep teenagers at home in a bid to stop this riot from spreading across France to newer areas and from the situation worsening. He suggested social media was fueling copycat violence in different cities across France. Now, there has been a second crisis meeting with top ministers. President Macron has advised social media and said that the social media is playing a considerable role in spreading unrest triggered by the deadly police shooting of a 17-year-old for an alleged traffic violation. Speaking about young rioters, he said, "We sometimes have the feeling that some of them are living on the streets of video games that have intoxicated them," unquote. The fatal police shooting of a 17-year-old outside Paris this week has sparked off massive disorder in the French suburb. Protesters have burnt thousands of cars. They've burnt buses, trams, malls, even a library. I'll get you much more on this big story, but let's quickly listen into the French President Emmanuel Macron. There is an apprehension emergency may have to be imposed in France for some time.
Un tiers des interpellés de la dernière nuit sont des jeunes, parfois des très jeunes. C'est la responsabilité des parents de les garder au domicile. Et donc il est important pour la quiétude de tous que la responsabilité parentale puisse pleinement s'exercer, et j'en appelle au sens de la responsabilité des mères et des pères de famille. La République n'a pas vocation à se substituer à eux. Et sous l'autorité de la Première ministre, les décisions prises aujourd'hui seront déclinées dans
The images from France, and it's not just restricted now to Paris. Let me get you the latest images that are coming in from the violence-hit areas. The French President Emmanuel Macron convened a second crisis meeting today. He urged parents to keep teenagers at home. He said it's the social media that's fueling copycat protests. The French police have arrested more than 875 protesters as the violence spreads. The police have said 492 buildings were damaged. Rioters have burned more than 2,000 automobiles. But violence continues. On Friday, the video circulating on social media showed a devastating scene. Rioters set ablaze the largest public library in the city of Marseille. Protesters also vandalized malls and superstores. These are images that you see of protesters breaking into the Nike store in central Paris. They kicked and smashed windows. This was the hyper center of the French capital, a very prominent mall. Armor-plated police vehicles ran through the charred remains of cars and several other barricades that had been set up by protesters. This happened in the northwestern suburb of Paris. Tens and thousands of police officers have now been deployed to quell the protests that have gripped the country 3 nights in a row now. Massive police deployment today. Violent protests rocked Paris and its suburbs for the third night. Protesters shot fireworks at the police and set more than 2,000 cars on fire. This after the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old youth during a traffic stop. More than 800 protesters have been taken into custody. Harder action is likely to be taken. The apprehension is that the situation will worsen over the weekend. But to prevent that situation from worsening, so far 40,000 police personnel, including armed police personnel and special forces, have been deployed. More are on standby. The apprehension is emergency could be imposed in France. Rights groups have accused the law enforcement agencies in France of being infested. This is what they're saying, infested with systemic racism, an allegation that President Macron had previously denied but conceded that the shooting was inexcusable.
Crisis grips France as mass unrest continues. Building torched, stores looted, and over 600 arrested overnight. The killing of 17-year-old Nahal M by a police officer has fueled riots across France. Nahal's mother joined thousands-strong crowds demanding justice for teenager son shot by French police. Rioters burned down the largest public library in Marseille and facade of an Olympics aquatic training center in Paris.
Ce petit Naël, ce qui a sauvé son honneur.
I think our police are tired. Our police need training. Our police need more people. They are exhausted and it gets even more out of hand. And within this same police, there is racism. And we absolutely have to fight that.
Tué par la police, ça va falloir le reconnaître.
Meanwhile, government is looking at all possible solutions to restore peace in the country.
These are in fact very violent individuals, notably very young, who are attacking our police stations, town halls, our public infrastructure, and I really would like to emphasize that these individuals are clearly not representative of the local residents who are just as shocked as we are, and the elected officials who are themselves being taken on by these violent individuals.
French President Emmanuel Macron chaired a second special security meeting amid persistent violence.
Un tiers des interpellés de la dernière nuit sont...
In the next hours, we'll take measures. And we have started taking measures in coordination with social media platforms to remove the most sensitive content. The state services are working in coordination with these platforms to obtain an effective response. And I expect these platforms to have spirit of responsibility.
vocation à se substituer à eux.
The French president has appealed parents to keep teenagers at home and prevent them from joining the riots. Marseille has banned public demonstrations and stopped public transport as it struggles to quell the violence. Additional security forces are being deployed to contain the nationwide unrest in France. Bureau Report, India Today.
And India Today's Shiv Arur now joins me for more on this story. Shiv, you and our entire team, we're watching developments very closely. We are told emergency may have to be imposed. Shiv, Elizabeth Borne, the Prime Minister of France, has indicated emergency may have to be imposed to bring the situation under control. What's the latest that you're picking up?
Well, the truth is things are getting worse. It's been 3 days, it's the fourth night now, and by all accounts, things have actually spiraled out of control in many parts of Paris and cities like Marseille, like Toulouse, Lyon, Lille, as well as others. And it could be getting worse. The latest images of that ancient library being burnt down in Marseille is the latest and most viral image coming out of France after 3 days of tension, arson, rioting, and it looks like things are actually spreading to other places as well, Gaurav. The second crisis meeting by Emmanuel Macron, the president, has taken place. The Prime Minister of France has indicated that they are ready to declare a state of emergency depending on how things actually happen. But if you look at the figures, and they're all climbing at this point of time, they're shattering. Over 800 cars destroyed, 4,000 buildings, damaged, thousands of fires started in various places, fireworks being used, police being attacked, over 800 people being, arrested. That number has probably doubled by now. The kind of tension, the kind of fear and loathing in different parts of Paris, especially the working class neighborhoods, means that the Parisian government, the administration there, is struggling to contain the violence. And when something like this runs for 4 days non-stop, yes. What's going to calm it down? Is it going to be brute force? Is it going to be appealing to communities in these working class neighborhoods? One doesn't really quite know. But the looting has also started. Remember, you saw a Nike store being looted. This kind of thing, in many ways spirals completely out of control when more people join in. Social media is being used, public transport is being used as well. So it's steadily getting worse.
France on fire. We remain on this big story. On the 14th of July, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Paris. He will be the guest of honor at the Bastille Day parade on the 14th of July. This also marks the silver jubilee of India-France strategic relationship, a friendship that's actually stood the test of time. There will be an Indian military contingent and 3 Indian Air Force Rafale fighter jets will fly past the saluting dais on the Bastille Day parade. There is, however, some concern about the violence, the arson and the vandalism in France. The government, as my colleague Shiv Arur was just telling us, is trying its best to sort out the situation. You heard the French President Emmanuel Macron. He reached out to parents because, as you heard, the Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne, she said there are a large number of youth out on the streets and the President is appealing to parents to keep children indoors. When it comes to India-France relationship, do keep in mind that 26 Rafale fighter jets, 36 in all, 36 Rafale fighter jets were procured by the Indian Air Force from France as part of an intergovernmental framework. Now, 3 of these jets will take part in the Bastille Day flypast over Champs-Élysées on the 14th of July. And I now want to shift focus to the other big story here on India Today. Shifting focus from France, moving to the biggest ever multination air exercise of the Indian Air Force. Operation Tarang Shakti, India will be hosting 12 air powers of the world in this joint war game in the Indian airspace. Now, this drill will see the participation of air forces of the United States, France, Australia, and many others. India Today's Shiv Arur with this exclusive report.
One of the world's top air forces, battle-proven, professional and highly sought after across the world. The Indian Air Force is all set to take things to the next level. With the country's biggest ever multination air exercise, codenamed Tarang Shakti, the Indian Air Force will play host to the air forces of 12 nations in a joint war game in Indian airspace. Nothing remotely this big or complex has ever been conducted or even planned in the past. India Today can confirm that the Tarang Shakti air drill will see the US Air Force, Royal Air Force, French Air Force, and Royal Australian Air Force fly larger fighter and support teams with India for the joint war drill. The other 8 air forces are being lined up and will be confirmed shortly, but could include Japan and Singapore as well. While Indian fighter teams have participated in several similar multination air exercises abroad, this will be the first time that India will be the battlefield for such a large and diverse exercise. As a comparison, Tarang Shakti will be 4 times larger than air exercise India has ever conducted. With 4 leading world air forces locked, it is almost certain that Tarang Shakti will see air drills with American F-16s, British Typhoons, French Rafales and Australian FA-18 Super Hornets. In addition to fighters, the participant countries will also bring transport jets, helicopters and special mission aircraft like AWACS. Apart from the obvious benefits of getting to fly and practice with the best air forces in the world, Tarang Shakti is also a major message from India. Stay tuned as we tell you more about this mammoth venture. Bureau Report, India Today.
I once again want to bring Shiv Arur into this conversation. Shiv, the largest ever multination air exercise conducted by the Indian Air Force, clearly with an expansionist neighbor in mind. Democracies coming together to checkmate an expansionist China.
Well, Gaurav, Tarang Shakti is an affirmation that the Indian Air Force is by far the predominant air power force in the Eastern Hemisphere. Certainly one of the biggest, most sought-after air forces in the world, but certainly in the region. And I think what Tarang Shakti does is not just signal to the world that the Indian Air Force is this predominant air power in the region, but that the Indian Air Force is perhaps the most dependable air force in the region. And that India is a country that's capable of hosting 12 air forces in its airspace for an air exercise, the complexity of which has never been attempted before. Now, India, remember, to be sure, has participated in many air force exercises abroad, including multi-nation air exercises like the Red Flag exercise in the US. You've seen, some happen in Israel as well. But before this 12-nation exercise that's going to happen here, the biggest exercise that India had hosted here featured just 3 countries. Now it's going to be 12. Any air exercise is extremely complex. Imagine multiplying it by a factor of 4. So hats off, first of all, to the Air Force for attempting something like this. They're going to pull it off in style, obviously, but also the big picture, Gaurav, apart from, pilots, maintenance crews, ground crews of the world's finest dozen air forces working together, becoming more interoperable, becoming ready for joint operations should the need arise, is also a signal in the post-Ukraine world.
Yes.
It's also a signal to a world where China's hegemony in the Indian Ocean region, in India's areas of responsibility responsibilities are at their peak, and therefore the messaging is something that should also not be mistaken. It's also about military operations. It's also about India's readiness to work with world air forces against those to seek to trouble us.
Shiv, keep tracking that story. I will come back to you for more. But for the moment, I want to shift focus to a story that will lead to perhaps a lot of stormy debates in Parliament. The Narendra Modi government is all set to move forward with the Uniform Civil Code pitch. Sources in the government tell India Today that this bill on the common civil law could be tabled in the monsoon session of Parliament, set to begin next month. We get you much more in this report.
The bill to give India a uniform civil code could come as early as next month. Sources tell India Today the Narendra Modi government could table a bill on the implementation of a uniform civil code in the monsoon session of Parliament. The bill, if tabled, could be sent to a parliamentary standing committee for further deliberations. In an indication that wheels are already set in motion, a parliamentary committee on law and justice headed by BJP's Rajya Sabha MP Sushil Modi has called a meeting on Monday to discuss the need for a common civil code. The panel comprises 31 members of parliament drawn both from government and opposition parties.
डाइवर्सिटी का ध्यान में रखते हुए ही तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने आधे दर्जन मामलों में ये कहा कि कॉमन सिविल कोड बनना चाहिए, यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड बनना चाहिए। तो हम तो जो संविधान में लिखा है उसी को लागू करने की दिशा में भारतीय जनता पार्टी आगे बढ़ने का प्रयास कर रही है।
Meanwhile, a draft uniform civil code has already been prepared in Uttarakhand. A committee set up by the Pushkar Singh Dhami government will soon submit the draft.
Drafting of the proposed Uniform Civil Code of Uttarakhand is now complete. The report of the expert committee, along with the draft code, would soon be printed and submitted to the government of Uttarakhand.
उनका ड्राफ्ट तैयार हो रहा है। ड्राफ्ट लगभग पूरा होने की ओर है। जैसे ही हमको ड्राफ्ट मिलेगा, हम उसका अवलोकन करेंगे।
As the Narendra Modi government pushes for the Uniform Civil Code, opposition parties are calling it diversionary tactics ahead of Lok Sabha elections.
It is against fundamental rights, Article 25 of the Constitution. I have been saying that first you bring in Uniform Civil Code among Hindus. Uniform Civil Code should first remove Agama rules. Only then uniformity will prevail.
It was a constitutional assurance that UCC will be implemented when the minorities agree. There has been no consensus on this issue. So TMC would oppose UCC rollout at this time.
The Congress has cautioned against any hurry in framing the Uniform Civil Code.
ये इतना सेंसिटिव और महत्वपूर्ण विषय है, इसके ऊपर कोई अंतिम निर्णय लेने के लिए पहले सरकार एक अपना पक्ष रखे, फिर जो जितने भी स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं उसमें समय लग सकता है, समय दें। कानून कोई रोज नहीं बनता।
One nation, one law seems to be the new opposition dilemma. After the Aam Aadmi Party, Uddhav Thackeray's faction of the Shiv Sena will also back the central government's push for the Uniform Civil Code. The Uniform Civil Code, if implemented, will replace personal laws based on religion, customs and traditions with one common law for all Indians.
The question is whether the Bharatiya Janata Party will be able to bring together all the like-minded parties, even from the opposition, as far as supporting this particular bill is concerned, whether this will become a reality in the upcoming monsoon session when it will be tabled in the Parliament. The camera person Abhishek Bhai, don't wait for it.
One nation, one law. From Ladakh to Lakshadweep, from Arunachal Pradesh to Gujarat, across the length and breadth of our country, when it comes to issues of divorce, inheritance, adoption and marriage for all Indians. We will track that story very, very closely. That is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching. Coming up next is Business Today with Udayan Mukherjee.